Oh, there we go. Try to mute on again, like last time. It's all good. What is up, everybody? Welcome inside the Guilty as Charged podcast. My name is Steven. I am the host, and joining me today are my guys Tyler and Alex. Tyler, we'll start with you, man. How are you doing today?
Today I was on Fullerton's campus and some random person came up to me and asked me about the concept of hell. And I should have just flipped my laptop around and showed them film of the tight end class.
Shit. Yeah, man. I have to say I gained some more appreciation today for Gerald Everett, and really glad that the Chargers were able to make that move. So, Alex is here as well. Alex, how you doing, man?
Yeah, I gained a little bit more appreciation for Gerald Everett and a little less appreciation for RAS scores because you see some guys with some high RAS scores and then just running like they got plywood for knees. I don't know.
Yeah, man. This tight end class is deceiving. I mean, we heard like a few months ago during the All-Star game circuit that, all the tight ends were crushing it at the Shrine Bowl and all the tight ends were crushing it at the Senior Bowl. And then you watch the film and it's just like, ew. So we're going to dive into that class later. We got Joseph Munoz with Donovan Mitchell on the Jazz as his profile picture asking to sign Antonio Brown. No. Hard pass.
Seems like a joke. I believe this is a yoke, but
yeah,
we'll see.
Also, enjoy that profile picture while you have it, because Donovan Mitchell getting traded soon. Anyways, the first thing we're going to talk about today is the Chargers' interest in Derek Stingley, which was on full display today at the LSU Pro Day. We'll also talk about the Saints' decision to trade in front of the Chargers and kind of what that means, and then we'll also hit on the signing of Steven Anderson with the Arizona Cardinals and kind of how that impacts this wonderful and amazing tight end class, which we'll get into. But first things first, let's talk about the Chargers' interest in Derek Stingley. Of course, the cornerback out of LSU. It was really interesting to see the Chargers out in full force. Brandon Staley, Ronaldo Hill, and Derek Ansley were all in attendance at the LSU Pro Day, and the Chargers were specifically working Derek Stingley in a position drill. Brandon Staley was there. Derek Ansley was right there with him, working up a sweat. I love to see that. Alex, I think you kind of are the most down on Derek Stingley at this point. So, first of all, what did you make of the Chargers being there at Derek Stingley's Pro Day? And then kind of how you feel that impacts the ability to select him if he's there, of course, at 17.
I mean, I think them being there is them doing their due diligence, and Brandon Staley likes cornerbacks, so I mean, I'm sure he'll look into all the potential cornerback options that are there at 17 or ones later in the draft, as we've seen them, taking interest in all the later round wide receivers, for example. So they're going to do their due diligence, and there's a lot of pro guys that come from LSU anyway, so I didn't think too much of that. I do think Brandon Staley definitely loves the idea of Derek Stingley and just, placing him right next to JC Jackson. You move on from Michael Davis next year, and now, you're dealing with Derek Stingley, JC Jackson, and Asante Samuel potentially. I mean, that seems like a really nice potential secondary group that you could put together. But I have health questions on Derek Stingley, and, from his play, if you just showed someone the 2019 tape, I mean, that would, get him drafted in the top 5 of this draft. Like if you just showed someone that and didn't tell them about the health issues, but his play has declined because of injuries that we've seen, and also, coming back from a Lisfranc injury that doesn't really have a specific timetable or a really like high recovery rate. So I don't know. I have some questions with his lower body injuries, and I'm not out on him. Obviously, if they take him at 17, there'd be part of me that would be excited based on the potential, but I probably would be a little bit more risk averse there and go for one of the other corners at that spot.
I have not watched Derek Stingley, so I couldn't tell you if I love him, if I don't like him, whatever. Obviously, there are the medical concerns. Last year I bumped guys down my board for that specific reason, most notably Caleb Farley. Different situation, but same sort of situation. I'm glad everyone's really interested in Stingley, and the Chargers being there and Staley being there is awesome. But there are other players at the LSU Pro Day, ones that we've known that they've met with, like Neil Farrell. And B, I don't think he's going to be there. Stingley's going to be there at 17. And C, even if there's a good corner there like Stingley, I don't know if I'm into them taking a corner. I don't buy that they're going to take a corner to replace Michael Davis this year. Next year, maybe. And that's assuming that Michael Davis is still the outside guy and Asante Samuel Jr. isn't the outside guy anyway. But I just don't buy that they're going to take a corner at this spot. So it's really cool to see. I think they asked Stingley about his character, or not character, but they wanted to see that he could, after all this adversity, go and show out. And not because they've obviously watched the film on him. And we know Staley watches, 4 seasons of JC Jackson just to maybe sign him. Obviously, they've watched plenty of Stingley, but this is all fun. This is cool. If they take him, sure. But I don't buy that they're down there and with a supreme interest in Derek Stingley, or at least interest in a way that I also think will translate to them picking him at 17.
Man, I feel like I would feel you more if it were just like Derek Ansley was there. But Brandon Staley's not going to go to a pro day unless he's like really interested in a guy. Like, I think we rarely see head coaches at these pro days these days. And I love Neil Farrell, and I know you love Neil Farrell, but Brandon Staley's not going to Neil Farrell's pro day. You know what I mean? Like that's just not how this circuit is working. So I think they are interested in Derek Stingley. And, he said afterwards that they were kind of trying to figure out if Stingley still had it, if he still was that same kind of dog that they saw in 2019. So I think there's legitimate smoke there in terms of their interest in him. Sure. Whether or not he is there at 17 is another conversation. I kind of doubt it, but I think Brandon Staley and Ronaldo Hill being there means that they aren't interested in him. If it were just Derek Ansley, I'd be like, okay, like they're just, covering their bases. But all three of them being there together and, conducting an individual workout, if you will, I think that is significant. But I don't know. Maybe that's just me.
I think you're right that they do. Like, obviously, there's interest and there's legitimate interest. There's definitely smoke there. And I guess, if he's there at 17, I suppose they could take him. I don't buy that it's anything more than let's go see this very talented guy. And if he's there, maybe we'll take him. But like, I just don't buy that this is a thing that's going to happen. That's all.
I think if he's there, it's definitely possible. I do agree with Steven that there's smoke there and that Staley might very well like him. I don't know. Like, I don't get swung on the pro day. Like, Derek Stingley ran a 4.37. Sure. Yeah, I knew he was fast. Like, that's not the problem. When you talk about his medicals and the potential problems with taking him. The pro day is all just one big show anyway. But I like that Staley's interested and that his mind is thinking about all these things. But it didn't necessarily move the needle for me that they're going to draft him if he's there. I definitely think there's a lot of other guys they'll be interested, and there's a lot of pro days that we haven't seen, right? Like, so we'll see if Brandon Staley ends up being interested in any of those pro days as well. I like the idea of Stingley. I just have too many question marks on it at this point.
No, I feel you, Alex, because there are a lot of question marks. I think the significance of him being able to perform on the pro day means that he is healthy. He said that he was cleared 3 weeks ago, and that certainly is important. Whether that foot injury kind of leads itself to more foot injuries really is the concern there for me, because I think, it's more of a long-term thing than a short-term thing. This isn't like Caleb Farley, who went into the draft with like 4 certified back injuries, and you're just like, you have no idea what you're getting. So I think the pro day is significant from that aspect because it showed that he was healthy. I mean, he was like barely trying in that 4.37 or 4.43, I think was the official time. So I think the only significance really from the pro day is that it proved that he is healthy. He is cleared medically. He should be ready for training camp, barring another setback or anything like that. But to me, the concern is the tape, right? Like you go from this elite 2019 season. And again, I haven't really watched a ton of tape, like just, focusing in on Derek Stingley. Obviously, there were some LSU defenders that year that I watched. And so I kind of like watched Stingley on as kind of a bystander. But his 2020 tape was worse. His 2019 tape was kind of even worse than that. Granted, he only played 3 games. But to me, the concern is the decline more so than the injury, because, you look at to me, Sauce is like clearly CB1. But if you're comparing Stingley and Andrew Booth's tape is better and better each year, presumably kind of ascending, whereas Stingley is kind of on the decline. So I don't know, man. Like, I think he's definitely in that conversation for CB2, CB3, and I'm glad that he's fully healthy. But it is really interesting to see Brandon Staley down there in full force, running that workout with him. Derek Ansley, Ronaldo Hill there as well. So it is definitely something that kind of, your ears perk up when you hear that Brandon Staley is down there watching Derek Stingley.
Right.
Yeah, I'm trying to find last year who went to what pro day. I can't find anything because everything's about Stingley this year. That's just tearing apart my search engine.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go through this then. So let's say he's there at 17. They take him. What do you think happens to Michael Davis?
He stays on the team for a year.
Yeah, I don't think that they don't need to cut him financially. I think you can keep him for depth purposes. I think you can also kind of, ease Derek Stingley into the starting lineup if you're worried about his decline, if you're worried about the injuries. But, by the end of the season, Davis is likely out of the rotation. You know what I mean? Like he's going to be CB4, and then next year would obviously be cut.
Okay. And then do you believe that if Stingley were there, that they would have Michael Davis, like Staley would have paid Michael Davis, and because he did sort of paid Michael Davis last year.
He signed off on it at least, yeah.
He at least signed off on it. Do you think he would do that fast and to move on from him basically the following year?
I mean, they gave him a 2-year deal, basically. Like, I mean, they gave him the 3-year and big contract, and that was a great moment, but they built that contract like it was a short-term deal. So, I mean, I don't think they tied themselves to Michael Davis for too long. And I think part of that was intentional, just like, okay, let's keep the pieces that we have in place. And then, we can build on, we can see if Michael Davis is a piece of this Staley defense long-term, or if he's not later on, building off of that great 2020 he had. Didn't really do that. So, I mean, I think it's just short-term at this point. And then kind of in a way, I think it always has been, and they've always given themselves flexibility. Plus, it's not like they're paying a ton of the money, CB wise.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, as we've kind of said, Brandon Staley loves his DBs. I think that's an interesting dime package, because then you don't bring in a third safety, you bring in 4 corners, and I don't know, that's really interesting to me. But Brandon Staley said that he's into taking the whole best player available approach, and so if Stingley is there, I have a hard time believing that there's another player who has a higher ceiling than him. So, I think there are definitely some concerns. I don't think that Stingley should be a top 10 player because of those concerns. But if he's there at 17, I think that's fine value for a player with that kind of ceiling that we've seen in 2019. The question really is if Brandon Staley thinks that he can get that ceiling back out of Derek Stingley, and it's worth moving on to somebody like Michael Davis, who at his best is a quality CB2.
Yeah, I don't want to spend too much time on this because I know we'll get into corners in about a week.
Yeah.
But is there any precedent for this? Like someone almost 2, now 3 years ago, playing at a certain level and then just kind of not being available for 2 years in this way? Is there any kind of precedent for this?
I mean, I'm sure there has been, but not off the top of my head.
Yeah, I'd have to look into that one a little bit more.
Yeah,
and,
I don't know.
Some people have kind of compared his situation to Kayvon Thibodeau's situation. I happen to think that Thibodeau still put out elite tape this past season, but yeah. All right, so we'll move on kind of geographically to the next city over, if you will. The New Orleans Saints have traded with the Philadelphia Eagles recently. This is a draft trade that does impact the Chargers. Obviously, the Saints moving up from 18 to 16, so they jumped the Chargers at 17. Eagles are able to kind of, split their assets and take one of their first-round picks this year and turn it into a first-round pick next year. Saints obviously have 2 first-round picks this year. So, Tyler, we'll start with you. What do you make of the Saints' decision to jump the Chargers?
Separate from that, Eagles, fantastic. What a great trade for you guys. I'm sure Alex is pretty happy with that. Yeah, no, just saying great trade for the Eagles, of course. Some people discuss this as being like a Chargers thing, like they need to jump the Chargers for someone. I mean, it's possible. It's possible, but it's so far away. Why would you make that move? Now, if Derek Stingley were there in the draft at 16 and then the Saints jumped the Chargers at that point for Stingley, that would almost make more sense. But obviously we don't know that at this point. So to me, I really don't buy that they're moving up for a quarterback. Not much capital and not this draft. And they have Jameis Winston back. They signed Andy Dalton. I'm not saying those two are the future of your organization by any means, but like I'd rather just kind of wait for the next class or the following class or whatever than go up to get maybe this quarterback. So I don't really buy that it's for a quarterback. To me, I just think they want to get the best players. There's 15 first round picks, maybe 20 first round picks in terms of grades at best. It sounds like this class there's like 15 at most. So I think they just want the best players they can in sort of an all-in-ish year with Jameis and Winston, because the NFC is not that great, and we'll see. So I don't know if they really are going up to get a quarterback. Some people think they are. I don't buy it.
Being all in on Jameis Winston is hilarious to me. Like I
in
think
that
they were like
you could be.
I know, honestly, in the NFC, being all in on Jameis Winston and taking, let's say Trevor Penning and Christian Watson, like that probably is like the fourth best team in the NFC at that point. So I don't know, man. Like, not to say that Christian Watson will be their choice, just kind of throwing out a name, but I don't buy that it's for a quarterback because, like you said, they just signed Jameis, they just signed Andy Dalton, they just drafted Ian Book last year. Not to say that Ian Book would deter you from drafting a quarterback, but they have a lot of recent capital spent in the quarterback position. And then, of course, Taysom Hill is converting to tight end or still being his quarterback self. I don't really know what's happening there. So, Daniel Jeremiah tweeted out that he's hearing that they just want 2 quality starters. And like Tyler's saying, they just want to get guys into the building this year. But a small part of me would think that they would trade up, but not for a quarterback. I think they could trade up for an offensive tackle because, they do have a really high quality roster. They just lost Teron Armstead. Maybe they trade up to 7 and they get Charles Cross. So I wouldn't be surprised if they did that. I know that's really kind of bad value, trading 2 first round picks up for an offensive tackle at 7 or 5 or whatever. But this quarterback class isn't like trade a bunch of assets to go select Malik Willis at 5 because you'd have to jump the Carolina Panthers. So I don't know. To me, this feels like they're just going to stick with those 2 picks and then, pick whoever is there.
This trade is like the stupidest fucking thing I've ever seen for the Saints. Like, what are you doing? Like, everyone talking. Tyler just said being all in with Jameis Winston and Andy Dalton. Okay, let me read you the Saints' 2022 opponents. They play Tampa Bay twice. They play the Rams. They play the Ravens. They play the Bengals. They play the Raiders. They also play Cleveland, Pittsburgh, San Francisco, Philadelphia. Like, they have an awful fucking schedule. Like, and they're going to go all in with, they're not 2 quality starters away, especially when you don't have a quarterback in this league. Like, if they want to jump the Chargers and they want to take Trevor Penning, take him. Take Charles Cross.
Please take Trevor Penning.
Take Trevor Penning more. Take a bad wide receiver, please. But like, take someone that we don't want. But honestly, if they're going to spend all that capital to jump the Chargers by 1 spot, fine with it. Like, I don't care at this point. Like, I just think that's ridiculously bad value. You're giving up a first round pick next year that may very well end up being a top 15 pick. So like, this is a really risky trade for them. And I just don't understand it. I accept it as a partial Eagles fan. Thank you to Howie Roseman. He doesn't know how to make the picks, but he pulls off these trades perfectly. So thanks to Howie. But no, like I don't get this move for them at all. In terms of how it affects the Chargers, I mean, the Eagles were going to make a pick there anyway, and there's some needs there that could have overlapped with the Chargers too. So I don't get this trade for the Saints at all. I don't think that this really affects the Chargers in like a big way, other than 1 offensive tackle might be off the board more. But to me, that shouldn't change the Chargers draft equation, especially if they're in on someone like Derek Stingley or if they're in on some of the wide receivers. It might change the math a little bit, but I'm not concerned, especially if the Saints might trade up again. And either go grab a quarterback or another player. Please go take a quarterback. Take as many off the board as you can before the Chargers, if that's the case. But I just think the Saints aren't anywhere close to competing. They're in a division with Tom Brady and the Bucs, who are going to win it again. They're going to be grinding it out for like the last wild card spot, and I don't think they're going to make it because their schedule is really tough. So I don't get this trade for the Saints, but thank you. And as far as how it affects the Chargers, I really don't think it affects them that much because they're still going to get a really quality player there, regardless if the Saints take offensive tackle 4.
Yeah, I think that really is like the only effect for the Chargers is that if they do stick with those 2 picks and they don't trade up for somebody, then that 16th pick is probably the floor for Trevor Penning. So, they do desperately need a left tackle. The Saints have to keep that reputation of having a quality offensive line. So, as Teresa Compapas points out, maybe that's a Jameson Williams floor as well. So, that's an interesting thing to keep an eye on, but I don't think this is necessarily, changes much like Alex is saying. Like I said, really it's the floor for Trevor Penning as offensive tackle 4 is really the big takeaway. I just don't I don't understand if your goal is to go trade up for a quarterback, why would you do all those other things? And if your goal is to get a franchise quarterback, why would you not get assets for next year? Like, that's the thing that the Eagles are doing, right? The Eagles are saying, like, okay, we're going to give Jalen Hurts another chance. And next year, if we decide to move off him, then we can go. We now have the assets to go trade up for a Bryce Young, a CJ Stroud, or whoever. There's always that dark horse that comes out of nowhere. So we're seeing that with kind of like the Lions have two picks next year. That really is like the smart thing to do if you're trying to, trade for a quarterback. And going to trade all these assets to go get Malik Willis at 5, like, oh man, like that would just be brutal.
I get it. Like, I get that the quarterback class isn't good, but if you're going to give up all this capital, it's kind of like it better be for a quarterback. Like, if you want to trade for Charles Cross or someone like that, like, fine. But they just gave up like 4 future draft picks to go grab, a guy. Like, and I don't think that that's good value at all. So for me, you have at it if you want to jump the Chargers by 1 spot and give up, your entire future to go do it. Like that's just weird to me. Don't understand this trade at all. But it is almost like it better be for a quarterback. Like, if you think Malik Willis is the guy, it's the only way to justify it, in my opinion. So I don't think that'll end up being the case, but good luck being all in on Jameis Winston and Andy Dalton in a year where you don't have Sean Payton.
Yeah, definitely. I think we'll see because we should be for a quarterback. And now at the time, they definitely had a quarterback, that Drew Brees guy. But in 2018, they did give up a future first and a third, and I think like a 6th for Marcus Davenport. Like, so when they traded up to from 27 to 14, we thought it was anybody else, and then it ended up being Marcus Davenport. So if they see a guy that they want or guys that they want, they're going to go get it, regardless of whether it makes any sense to us.
Yeah, I don't know. The Saints just do things differently than everybody else, and if this ends up being like Trent McDuffie and Kenyon Green, man, like that would just be like unsurprising.
I feel like this is just kind of like in a bigger way because the Saints gave up a lot more capital, but in a way, how I felt about the Eagles Dolphins trade last year, where it's like, okay, you're going to give a future first to the Eagles to go get Jalen Waddle over Devonta Smith. Is that much more valuable to you? Right. So like, is Charles Cross is moving up 1 spot to jump, for an OT or a wide receiver at that point, that valuable to you that you just give up all these picks? Like that's the thing for me.
I will say, if Cross is there at 16 and then they take him and then the only thing left of the Chargers is Penning, then that's worth it to the Saints if they wanted a tackle.
But then I would pass on Penning at that point. Like, I mean, I don't know.
Oh,
like,
of
course. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, the Charles Cross thing it's gonna be really interesting. Everybody that I talk to about this is always like, oh, Rashawn Slater fell to 13. It's like, yeah, because there were 4 quarterbacks that went before Rashawn Slater. There's not 4 quarterbacks that are gonna go before 17. I can guarantee you that. Yeah. So I would be shocked if Charles Cross were on the board at 17 at this point. Anyone? Bueller?
No. Where did Fields go?
Fields 11. Was 11, the trade up, or 10.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I thought he went after us. Never mind.
No, he went to the Giants. Yeah, the Giants traded up.
The Bears.
Oh no, the Bears traded up with the Giants. Yeah.
That was at 10, right? Because Parsons was 11.
No, Parsons. No.
Or Parsons was 12.
I don't remember. No, I think Fields was 11, Devonta was 10, and then Parsons was 13 because the Cowboys traded back with the Eagles.
Well, Slater was 13. Slater was 13, and I know that.
Oh, so yeah, Parsons was 12 then. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Were you looking it up, Tyler?
Yeah. Fields at 11.
Okay.
Yeah.
There we go. Yeah. So, I mean, I'd be pretty, it sounds like the Panthers are going to take Kenny Pickett. I guess Matt Rule recruited Pickett to Temple back in the day. So there's kind of a love there. So,
God, why does every division that Brady be in just get run by complete dullards like every time he takes it over? It's so annoying that he unretired, and I feel like he unretired just because he knew all these teams were going to self-destruct.
Yeah.
Like I don't understand it. Like the Saints know football, and they're just being stupid, and they're going to give Brady another Super Bowl, and it's going to be ridiculous, and I'll have to admit that he's the GOAT. I never will, but I'm frustrated. But thank you for the picks.
Hey man, you get Jalen Hurts for another year, so
no. Well, that's the thing. You said Bryce Young, and I was like, oh boy, this trade's worth it now.
There you go. All right, we'll move on here. So we're going to talk about rather frustrating decision that the Chargers decided not to re-sign Steven Anderson. Instead, he is going to be signing with did sign, I should say, that is official. With the Arizona Cardinals on a 1-year, sounds like vet minimum deal. So this is another one, the Kaiser White stuff hurt, but I think this one is also in that same kind of range just because of the value that Steven Anderson brings to this offense that he presented last year. And of course, came on the show and had a great interview with us. So this just, it's a part of the business of football that I don't like, and I'm sure Brandon Staley, he echoed a similar sentiment when talking about Kaiser White. But when you have a player like this that really doesn't cost that much and can fill so many different roles for you. I mean, when Donald Parham went down with his concussion, Steven Anderson really stepped up and gave this team a boost, and he took on a new position for this team as that fullback hybrid tight end kind of player, improved his blocking at a tremendous level, improved his ability on special teams at a great level as well. So I'm not going to lie. Like, I understand, they're probably trying to get younger, and we'll talk about some guys in a second that they could potentially replace him with. But the fact that Steven Anderson probably is only going to cost like $1.2 million and the Chargers just let him walk for nothing, it's a little frustrating, man. I'm not going to lie.
I would say of the overall process to me so far has been a bit frustrating. I think they're trying to find a way to replace and develop, with younger guys. And to that certain extent, I get it. Like, you want to see your team draft Trey McKitty, develop him, and make him your starter in lieu of, Steven Anderson leaving. I don't like him leaving. Like, even though I get why he's leaving, I get that Everett was brought in, then he's a good blocker. And I get that McKitty could probably, take the next step. But I don't know, man. He was just doing things out there from the moment the week 1 started against the Washington football team, now Commanders. He was doing fantastic work. And I don't like that they let him go. This guy who completely changed, like, to me, he changed his entire career in one offseason with the Chargers. He was kind of a not great blocker, special teams liability, maybe a tight end you throw in the slot, 11 catches or whatever it was, turning into a guy that I thought was one of the best fullback, H-back kind of guys out there. And he's just gone. And it's just kind of a surprise. I think he was a guy that was blocking as well on special teams for Andre Roberts. That unit was kind of gelling together. So him going is definitely a bummer. The best I can say is that I do believe in Kevin Koger and this group. Again, they took Steven Anderson, who I thought was a bit of a liability as a blocker, and turned him to a guy that I really wish they had brought back to be a blocker. So if Kevin Koger thinks that, and I don't know how much decision he had in this, but if he thinks that he can get this out of Trey McKitty or a draft pick that we can talk about, I believe him, because that tight end group really did grow that past year. But still, the idea of having to replace one of the best linebacker seasons you've seen in a while, your second team all-pro returner that's probably on his way out, your excellent H-back, like having to replace those guys is just a bit risky to me right now, especially when all those guys are going to sign for a cap hit of $5 million this year.
Yeah, I'm not as heartbroken about this one. This one's fine. I guess in comparing the thought process, like the issue is letting Kaiser White walk, but it's also the fact that they are depending on Kenneth Murray and they're depending on Eamon Bamiga to play full roles for them. When we already talked
Sure.
about on the Saturday Q&A what their PFF grades were, but I won't go into that any further. But you're relying on players that have been bad and unreliable to now be reliable in the absence of Kaiser White, right? So that's part of the problem there. Steven Anderson, I think, was really kind of on the team because they knew Jared Cook couldn't block. I mean, that was the situation last year. And so I mean, that's partially why he was here, right? I mean, that's why they kept 4 tight ends and Gabe Neighbors. And not really justifying keeping Neighbors, but he was here for that reason. And I don't know, letting him walk, I get why people are frustrated by it, but it's also like they do want to see more from McKitty and they do want to see him kind of turn into that blocker as well. And now they have a legitimate tight end one who is a receiver and a blocker. So for me, not to mention, I mean, he's one of the better blockers among starting tight ends in the league in that regard when you look at the stats as well. So for me, I get why people are irked by him not coming back and the process of it in general of like just not bringing these guys back. But for me, I'm much less, I guess, offended by bringing or not bringing Roberts and not bringing Anderson back than I am when it comes to Kaiser White. And also, you do have to keep in mind, I think the special teams being run by Ryan Ficken and those two guys being heavily involved in special teams last year. And Ryan Ficken kind of seemingly getting a clean slate, except for Dustin Hopkins, who's back. Like that, I think plays a role into it as well. Versus, if you look at the defense is largely still coached by all the same people, including Brandon Staley, and they still decided to let Kaiser go. But yeah, no, I am. This could have been something where it's like, yeah, you cut Neighbors to open a spot for Anderson, right? Like, I do think that is something that would have been preferable. But for me, I'm less hurt by the process on this one than I was with some of the other free agent departures for the Chargers this year. And ultimately, I think they'll be fine. I think Parham is a good blocker. I think that Everett, as we said, is a good blocker, and McKitty is kind of developing into one as well. And they could still draft a tight end as well, although I see less of a point to going with 4 tight ends now that you have a starting tight end one who's not a complete liability in that regard. No hard feelings, Jared Cook. But no, I think that it's definitely a bummer. I would have liked him in the locker room and liked him in that tight end room in general, but I'm not really too broken up about it.
I think you have a point about the Kaiser White situation being different for sure because of the players that are behind them. But I think Brandon Stingley does want 4 tight ends / 1 fullback. I'm not saying that has to be 5 people, and I hope it's not 5 people. I hope that we can. I hope we don't have to waste the roster spot. But I do think that if you, I think he does want 3 tight ends and then 1 hybrid player. Like I think that's kind of the mold that he's looking for, with somebody who can fill in as a fullback and H-back and tight end when necessary. I mean, he really values the tight end position. I think Joe Lombardi does as well. We heard Joe Brady say that the tight end position was the second most important position outside of the quarterback in that Saints kind of hybrid offense. So I think they are going to have 4 bodies in that room this year. I hope it's not 5, but I do think that the Chargers can still add one of these draft prospects in to fill that H-back fullback role, or hand it to Neighbors, because to me, like, I think McKitty can do that for sure, but I think they want McKitty as an inline blocker. I think they want him as that traditional F tight end. They want him as that traditional blocking kind of player. They want Gerald Everett as that big slot who can block, unlike Jared Cook. And then Donald Parham is kind of, your traditional tight end, so to speak, that can do a little bit of both. And then they have the hybrid spot, like I mentioned. So I think for me, like I said, it's a minimum salary. It would have taken a draft need completely off the board. Like the thing about needing a true tight end one, and if they had headed into this class, is that you probably have to take one in the 3rd round, because the second tier of this tight end class is just awful, man. Like the drop off is crazy. So you sign Gerald Everett so you don't have to reach on a tight end. And if my options are to draft Isaiah Likely, for example, in the 5th round, or sign Steven Anderson for a minimum contract, I would have rather just had Anderson. Like, that's my thing here, is that, it's just a way to take another need off the board, a position that Brandon Staley does value, Joe Lombardi does value, and at a very minimal cost. I mean, not saying that a 5th round pick is super expensive or anything like that, but it's just, one or the other. I would have rather just had Anderson at this point. He's familiar with the team, he's familiar with the building, and all that. He's a veteran glue guy, so it's just personal preference. And I do think that Anderson took a very positive step forward this past year.
Very cool that we're going to be spending 9 roster spots on running backs, fullbacks, and tight ends again. Great. Don't disagree with that at all.
Don't forget QB3.
Oh, don't forget Easton Stick. Hey, buddy.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I think it'll be 4 bodies. I think hopefully they learned from that decision. And I mean, Gabe Neighbors was inactive.
You don't need 4. I mean, like, they needed 4 last year for specific reasons, but you don't need 4. You can just have 3 tight ends. It's fine. Put a guy on the practice squad. I don't get why they need 5. Like, I get why, but Neighbors was a healthy scratch all of last season, and then they usually picked one of the tight ends to be a healthy scratch anyway. So, like, I don't know.
I have mild thoughts about the Gabe Neighbors thing and him potentially being only on the roster for a specific friendship, but
yeah. All right. So that's a good lead in to our discussion on the tight end rankings. So we're only going to do a top 5 today. We'll mention a couple of the second guys that we like, but this tight end class was not great, like I said. Before we get to the rankings, I have to say these rankings are brought to you by ExpressVPN, our friends over there. You can go start your free trial for international access and internet security at expressvpn.com/guilty. Again, you get a free trial. I think it's 3 months to improve your internet experience. So that being said, who went first last time? I think it was Alex, right? Oh, Tyler went first.
Okay.
All right.
What are we doing with top 5? Just 5 to 1, or are we splitting it
up?
I don't know.
Let's mention one guy outside of our top 5 we like, and then we'll go into the top 5. So Alex, why don't you kick us off there?
Yeah, okay. I'll mention a guy that when I started the rankings, I put him at number 8. He didn't end up making my top 5, but I originally planned this as a top 10 because I thought that's what we were doing. But then we were like, no, we hate all of these people. And
we don't hate them. We just don't love
we
them.
don't hate them. They just all simultaneously have cinder blocks for legs. I like Cole Turner out of Nevada. He is kind of one of the more interesting ones. It tested sort of poorly, I think, at the combine, but ended up having a pretty solid Senior Bowl from what I understand. And so he is a pretty athletic guy, played with Carson Strong. I think we talked about Romeo Doubs during the wide receiver breakdown briefly. But I just felt like the way that he makes plays kind of as a jump ball type of receiver has a lot of utility in the NFL. He's definitely not a blocker, and I don't think he has the body for that. But I do think he is a really solid kind of like receiver prospect. And I don't think he is like, this is the thing about this tight end class is like, I put this guy at number 8 and I'm like, well, he kind of sucks because he doesn't have elite agility. He does kind of get caught in quicksand sometimes, but I do think there is something to his verticality and how he can be used potentially in the NFL. Day 3 guy, in my opinion, if you want to take a shot on him. But he might be a guy that if you bulk him up, he can kind of actually work into that like not the hybrid role that we're talking about with Steven Anderson, but more like a hybrid tight end wide receiver type of deal. So yeah, I kind of liked what I saw on him playing with Carson Strong and all those guys in Nevada.
Yeah. So the guy that I did not watch, Cole Turner, outside of the game here that I saw him play in person, but apparently had a good Senior Bowl, and so I think that's an interesting one. The guy that I just really think he's a solid player is Jeremy Ruckert out of Ohio State.
Yeah.
We don't really have his testing numbers up on the RAS website, excuse me. But he looks like a good athlete in space, just not anything special. And when you watch Ohio State, you rarely see a tight end be involved. I mean, why would they? They have like 7 freaks at receiver that are all going to be first round picks. So it's just not a position that Ohio State traditionally values. But he had to make his role as a blocker, as a special teams kind of player. And I think he is one of the better blocking tight ends in this class. Somebody that really understands angles. He really understands leverage. I'm not the biggest fan of Bernard Rabin, like we've said, but he was on Brandon Thorne's podcast recently and talked about how important it is to have good leg drive and be able to, once you lock somebody out with your length, with your grip, with whatever you want to talk about, how important it is to keep your legs moving and drive players down the field. And I think Jeremy Ruckert really does a fantastic job with that. So I didn't see many tight ends hold their own against Aiden Hutchinson and David Ojabo when they were tasked in one-on-one situations. But Jeremy Ruckert was one of the few, probably the only one that I saw that did at least a decent job and held his own. So I put this out on Twitter earlier. Kind of gives me Hunter Henry vibes in the sense that he's not a great athlete, but he gets open over the middle. He can work in the flat, just really solid player overall. So if the Chargers did need kind of a blocking tight end, he'd be somebody that I'd be a little bit more interested in. But obviously that is McKitty. But in general, I do think Jeremy Ruckert can carve out a nice role for himself in the NFL.
Yeah, Ruckert did make my top 10. I would say he's not a crazy versatile, but they had from like inline tight end or H-back, he was versatile in that offense. You'd see him from like the H-back role run an angle route, and it's like, oh, well, where did that come from? Yeah. And they just never really got him involved, but you could see some things, chip and release, some pushing it downfield, skinny post, some jump ball. So I do like Ruckert. Cole Turner is a guy that was outside of my top 10. I watched 14, but I do still like him. I definitely see exactly what you would like him for, which is those good hands with that handful of opportunities to pluck the ball out of the air. He definitely has that. I'm not saying like a Donald Parham sort of thing, but he has that size. Right. And it seems like, I don't remember what the measurements were, but he has that arm length to really pair with that. So I don't want to call him a possession tight end, but he definitely has something different that some of these guys don't have. Okay, let's talk about some other guys that are outside of our fine. Different flavor, not my favorite, but Daniel Bellinger from San Diego State. I'm not going to say he's the best tight end in the world. I don't even think he was in a good situation to be a great tight end. That offense didn't really seem to be gelling all that much, but this is the guy who's right behind Jelani Woods on that RAS score. There is something there. And if you're going to get anybody or watch anybody who has sort of that yards after catch ability, that's literally all they asked him to do. For better and for worse, like he's good at that. Sure, there was that 73-yard reception against Arizona. He blazed down the field, didn't score, but still 73 yards on third down. Great. He's just not. That's kind of all they asked him to do. Like there wasn't much in that San Diego State offense to push it down the field for him. I did see moments where he was downfield and potentially open, but the quarterback was just not pushing it down the field all that much. So a lot of projection here, but you want to go with the testing at this point. You're cycling through some of these day 3 guys. Go for the testing, go for the yak, go for some intriguing traits there. So Bellinger, I think in the pros, if someone gives him a more like an actual NFL role rather than him just catching everything in the flat or on screens, I think he could do a little bit better than what he did in college.
Yeah, I'll just say regarding Cole Turner, I have no problem with you putting him at 14. I'm still a little bit miffed about the last guy you put at 14, but Cole Turner, you can put him at 14. That's fine.
Yeah, he's at 12. That makes you feel better.
Oh, okay. 12. Okay. Ooh.
Yeah, I didn't watch him, but I'm pretty sure that Turner would be at least ahead of Jalen Weidermeyer for me. So I'll
say the wrong board ranking.
I did not watch Jalen Weidermeyer. Whatever.
Oh my gosh, man. Picture
I watched him.
Yeah. So Weidermeyer is huge. I think he's like 6'7". So picture Donald Parham, but minus all of the athleticism.
And it's funny that you say picture Donald Parham minus the athleticism. I put him at number 10. That's how much this class sucks.
Man, it's just I had high expectations, or at least mildly high. And I will say I really like my top 5. I really like my top 5. It's just after that it gets dicey. So
yeah,
let's do this. We'll go 5 and 4 each, and then top 3 like we do with the other one. So Alex, who is 5 and 4, and then we'll kind of go around the horn like that.
At 5, I have Greg Dulcich from UCLA, and at number 4 I have Jelani Woods from Virginia. So okay, I like Jelani Woods, and I know everything is like the freak RAS score thing, but like he's not that athletic. Like that was the thing I saw on tape. Like obviously size, he'll test like a freak because he's huge. Um, but I thought watching the games, he felt a lot slower in terms of game speed than a 10. Like I wouldn't be surprised if he tested at like a 7.5, 8.5 RAS score. But I think the stuff with the RAS score is a little bit deceiving for me, but I get why he is that high, and I still do believe in him as an NFL prospect. Like I think
Sure.
he look, he's 6'7" and he runs a 4.6, right? Like there is an aspect of it where it's like Donald Parham, where it's like, okay, he's 6'8", he's big, he can go up, catch the ball, do what you ask him to, right? And Jelani Woods is more athletic than definitely I think than Donald Parham, but I don't know. I thought compared to what the RAS score was, that he just looked a little bit stiff. So that's why I might be a little lower on him than you guys are. But of course, I mean, I have him at number 4. So I think he's going to go clearly in those first 3 rounds, probably in the top 2 rounds, depending on how this tight end class gets like spurged out. But yeah, liked him, didn't love him. He's at number 4. So that's this tight end class in general.
Yeah, I will say that I think Jelani is the best blocking tight end of this class, and I think that's how he made his heyday at Oklahoma State. And he didn't really get many opportunities at Oklahoma State as a pass catcher. That really happened, this past season at Virginia. And I definitely see a little bit of the stiffness. To me, the long speed that is on his RAS profile is legitimate.
Yeah.
But his testing numbers, that the agility stuff, that's where I was like, okay, I don't know if I completely buy his 3-cone score.
Yeah, I'm also just kind of looking at NFL Network posted a graphic. It was the Jelani Woods Kyle Pitts comparison, and is going through all their measurements. I'm like, no, shut it down. We're not doing this. Like that's the kind of thing, is I think people are taking the RAs and the athleticism to mean that he's that kind of athlete. But he's definitely got some long speed. I just don't think he's that kind of athlete.
Yeah, there's definitely a departure when it comes to the shiftiness. I know people want to, especially Chargers fans, want to say Donald Parham, but to me, show me, maybe I just missed it, show me the play where he makes 2 Cleveland defenders miss and scores a touchdown. Well, obviously that's an NFL team, but
didn't he have that one catch against Kansas City in the meaningless game where he shifted around people? I don't know. That's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah, yes, that game, the Cleveland game, the Eagles game, there are plenty of instances where Donald Parham is making guys miss in the open field in a way that I don't think Jelani Woods can do just yet. You have to put him in your top 5. He's in my top 5. Jelani Woods is, but I think he's behind where Donald Parham is right now. And so where would you take behind Donald Parham? And like year 1 Donald Parham, I guess. XFL Donald Parham. I don't know. I don't know where I would take him. I have a 3rd round grade on him, and just barely.
Yeah, I do think that he's a draftable player for sure. And then, taking that kind of physicality really is kind of what stands out to me, both as a blocker and as a pass catcher, is something that would interest me. So at number 5, I have Chidoziem Okonkwo. I think they just call him Cheeto, which is super cool to me because Cheeto means dope in Spanish. Obviously he's not Spanish speaker, but I thought that was cool. He's somebody that to me is kind of the natural Steven Anderson role kind of player, and that's really like all they asked him to do. So basically his role at Maryland was as that H-back tight end blocker, and then he would basically, the only time he would get targeted is if he ran leak or if he ran like a shallow crosser, and just give him yards after catch. But on the occasion where they would let him run downfield, I think he showed off really good fluidity, really good athleticism. He tested okay, not great, not terrible. But I think he does have the skill set that kind of would lend itself to being a little more versatile than he was able to show at Maryland. So Cheeto Okonkwo is somebody that I would be interested in for the Chargers. And then number 4 for me is Isaiah Likely from Coastal Carolina. Somebody that finished very high in our composite rankings that Tyler filled out. And I think he's just really solid player across the board. Really is kind of a better version of Cheeto Okonkwo in the sense that he does fill that hybrid kind of role. And the thing that really drew me to him, it was actually his ability to run routes and separate, because that Chanticleer Coastal Carolina offense is really option based in terms of the receiving routes that they do run. So Isaiah really shows off a good ability to separate. He shows off a good understanding to get open against zone coverage. So he's somebody that I was pleasantly surprised by. I wasn't expecting him to be, necessarily a top 5 tight end, which again kind of speaks to this class. But I do have him as a 6.4 grade. So I like him. He's at number 4 for me.
Nice. Yeah. So what was, I guess, the tiebreaker between Likely and Okonkwo for you? Because I feel like they're very similar roles.
It was just the route running kind of thing. Likely does get the opportunity to run downfield a little bit more often, shows off a more versatile skill set in that regard. I think Okonkwo has the potential to become that kind of player, but Likely has legitimate route running chops for me right now, and that's kind of the biggest difference.
Also, it's Chig with the G.
Oh, it's a G. It's not a D.
No, it's Chiggy. It's like Chiggy Okonkwo.
Chiggy. Okay, well, that's my bad then. I could have sworn on one of the things I was listening to, they called him Cheeto. But
no, that's Chester. What else was I going to say?
All right, well, I apologize to Chiggy Okonkwo. I'm sorry.
Thanks to Chiggy watching the show. I'm sure he is.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
All right, this JM guy getting blocked for sure. Stop trolling. Get out of here. All right, Tyler, who is 5 and 4 for you?
Sorry, my thing went away. Okay, so number 5, mostly because I hate watch some of the blocking, and I felt like this player did a good job with it. I put Jake Ferguson from Wisconsin here. I was surprised, but I do think he is definitely one of the better blockers. He had, I believe, the most run block snaps of anyone. Like, it's Wisconsin. They're going to be running. He's blocking a guy who's very experienced in the 2 tight end sets as the H-back, or 2 tight ends with the fullback or whatever. So yeah, most blocking reps among Power 5 tight ends. I don't have any other way to quantify how he did, but a top 5 pro football focus run block grade. 0 pressures allowed, only 34 pass blocking snaps, but hey, he allowed 0, so there's that. This is a guy who's very experienced in, again, those 2 tight end sets with a fullback, H-back, in line, blocking from, slice, sniffer, chip and release, whatever you got to do. This guy's got good hands. I wasn't overly impressed with most of the guys outside of the top, maybe 4 or so, 30 yards a game, 35 yards a game. So I'm not going to sit here and pretend like he's a great receiving option, but there was some untapped potential, I think, on display. I think against Penn State, he had that tough one-handed grab on that seam ball. There was that screen pass over the middle, or screen pass sort of to the middle, to the right, where he made 2 guys miss. He was a contested catch touchdown, I think, that game too. So there are different points of the field that he is winning, doing somewhat difficult things. And again, the numbers look okay. The RAS score is 6.74. I'm not sitting here pretending like he's the best guy, but I think he's a good blocker. He's a very experienced blocker. I think that's going to be able to keep him on the field in the right offense wherever he goes, something very run heavy, of course. And then, yeah, there's some things that he flashes on display on tape that are like, okay, that's something to work with. So that's my number 5. What a
something to work with.
he is a 4th, like my number 5 tight end is a 4th round grade. That's how I feel about this.
Oh
group.
my Atlanta.
And then so Jelani Woods is my number 4. So we already talked about it. So I have some of the same concerns, of course, like the fluidity in motion. I don't think he's a shifty guy. He looks like he's raw. He looks like he's new to the position in terms of being a receiver, but there's so much there that you love. So I have him at number 4.
Yeah, I think Ferguson was the last like traditional blocking tight end kind of player that I watched after watching Jeremy Ruckert and Cade Otton. And so I think at that point I was just kind of like, oh my gosh, get this. I'm sick of these blocking traditional tight ends, man. So yeah, Ferguson is definitely, up there in the conversation for one of the better blocking tight ends. I think he's like 9 on my list, so I don't hate it. But all right, Alex, let's move on here and get your top 3.
Yeah, my top three, I went with Charlie Collar from
Oh, okay.
Minnesota at
Nice.
number three. Number two, I went with Jeremy Ruckert. And number one, I went with Trey McBride. I assume we're all probably going to have the same number one. I don't know. But I don't know. Like, even thinking about Trey McBride, I'm like, he's good, he's fast, but none of us think he's like. Of course, last year's draft kind of spoiled us with Kyle Pitts as like the guy, but
Yeah.
none of those guys are. All of these guys are kind of like Hunter Henry second round pick at best. And that, it's funny because Steven mentioned seeing a lot of Hunter Henry with Jeremy Ruckert, and I kind of thought the same thing. Like, he's a little bit of just like, okay, well, he's probably not going to do much after the catch because he's not explosive. But in a class filled with guys that can't block and are unathletic and just bad, Jeremy Ruckert is like the most pro ready and least bad of them. Like, I guess that's kind of why I have him at number two, and I sort of deferred against like just looking again at his RAS score. Like, he is a good blocker, can be a receiver, when he needs to be, basically. I think he probably, again, is the most pro ready player now, which is sort of why I deferred to him being in the top three. I totally get why he's not higher for you guys, but he he just sort of makes some of the other guys on this list look a little bit incompetent. And that's why I have him at number two, I guess.
Yeah.
As far as the other spots, like, I think Charlie Collar kind of has like some interesting like flex ability. Like, you can sort of put him in different spots. Decent receiver out of the slot. I think you can put him there, and he's successful. His routes are a little bit weird because he is so tall. He's sort of got like a bit of a Donald Parham thing to him there, where he sort of just like runs weird. But obviously his RAS score was good. So I think he's got some solid potential and things he can kind of build on when he gets into the league. I wouldn't say he has the highest ceiling. I do still think that's like Trey McBride, and even someone like a Jelani Woods that we talk about. But I do think that he's definitely more of the higher ceilings here, and that's kind of why I had him at three.
Yeah. So Kohler's from Iowa State.
Iowa State. Helmets mixed, confused.
That's okay. I turned on Trey McBride, man, and the first game they're wearing orange jerseys, and I was like, like the hell? Did I turn on a Miami game? Like, what is happening here? So I was really confused about that one. But Kohler's a really good receiving option. I think he's one of those big power slot guys that can make some sense. This dude is lousy as a blocker, man. Like, just I think that really is the thing there. So that's kind of it with him, and also with Dulcich, who is in my top three. But I think Dulcich, his athletic profile just kind of lends itself. So Jelani Woods is number three for me. For similar reasons. So like I totally see the concerns, but I just think his size, his physicality, and like I mentioned, I think he's the best blocking tight end in this group. So I think he kind of has to be in the top, at least the top four, and I think we're all on the same page there. Number two is Dulcich. I think he is kind of the smoothest route runner of the group. I think he is, has an athletic profile that would lend itself towards being a yards after catch machine in the NFL. And I think, that kind of translates. But as a blocker, like I mentioned, he tries hard. Like, he does try, and I appreciate that. But he's just not great. And, I can't really blame him for being a not great blocker in Chip Kelly's offense, which is just a bunch of gadgety bullshit. I hated watching UCLA film, but I like Dulcich's ability to create separation, be a vertical threat as a tight end. So to me, that's kind of what separates Dulcich, because he does have that ability to run routes in the vertical parts of the field, unlike really any of the other tight ends in this class. So he could be more of a weapon instead. So that's why I have him there. And then I have Trey McBride at number one.
Yeah, I would love to. So Dulcich was at 6 for me, just didn't make it. And it's mostly just because of that blocking. I feel really bad, but I'm watching against Arizona State and he's getting dump trucked by edge defenders and whatever. And he's on his back. And I'm like, oh gosh, like, is he going to be a better tight end in the NFL than Jake Ferguson? Probably. But just watching the blocking, I was like, I couldn't quite put him in there. But as a receiver, there was that one play Oh, I forget what game it was, but he caught it down the sideline, made one guy miss, beat another guy
I
towards
think
the
that
end
was
zone.
probably
Like
LSU. Yeah.
yeah, like yeah, that was it. And you see a lot of what he can do. I wish he had just shown more of that. I had the opportunity to show that. Another really great catch on like a sideline ball. So really, really good stuff there. I just, as a blocker, it was really hard to buy into all that.
Yeah. All right, Tyler, finish us off here.
Okay, so number 3, I have Chiggy Okonkwo from Maryland. Number 2, Isaiah Likely. And number 1, Trey McBride. We've talked about all these guys. To me, it was very much a coin flip between Likely and Okonkwo. They're basically very similar to me with different things they can do. Likely, I just kind of ended up liking more. I don't know what ended up being my tiebreaker there, because Okonkwo has the better RAS score, but like Likely is better on our composite rankings, and so I don't know. He has a late as possible 3rd round grade from me, and he's my number 2 tight end. He has a 6 for me, and he's my number 2 tight end. So a lot of these guys are like 0.05 within each other.
Yeah.
I just don't really like most of them.
Yeah.
But like we talked about, again, diverse guy, out wide, in the slot. I guess he's the guy that can attack more points of the field than some of the guys behind him. And so I think you watch him on a post, a corner, a slide, leak, go, wheel, all that stuff that he can do. All the stuff that he can do as a blocker, as a perimeter blocker. There's definitely a lot there. It's a bummer that he tested so poorly, but it didn't really bug me on tape at all. So I think Okonkwo tested much better, but like Likely, it didn't bug me. So he's above Okonkwo for me. Chargers have met with Likely and Okonkwo, so we should definitely be considering these guys. Yeah. Hopefully not round 3, but potentially round 4. So definitely something to keep an eye on. And yeah, Trey McBride is just he's the guy. Like he has a late 2nd round for me. He had a 6.5 out of 8. He barely made it, but I do think he does do enough. He did test well. The numbers do look good. He can access most points of the field. So yeah, Trey McBride is my default number 1 practically. And he's probably going to be outside of the top 50 on my big board when all is said and done.
Yeah, I think McBride probably falls in like the 60-ish range for me once we get to that point. I will say, man, like looking at his statistics and seeing 91 catches for the season and 90 reps from the slot, like that's insane. The amount of production that he had this past season without being somebody that would go into the slot is just kind of crazy to me. Really don't see many teams use their traditional inline Y tight end as the feature of their offense, but that's what Colorado State did. And it was kind of fun. When I was growing up, I wanted to be a tight end, and Trey McBride was kind of living my dream of being target number 1 and never having to play in the slot. So I do think he's a good player, man. I do really like Trey McBride. I have a little bit of a concern in terms of the athleticism, but in terms of creating separation, in terms of high pointing the catch or high pointing the ball and all these things, there's a lot to like about McBride. But I also have a mid-2nd round grade on him, so I'm really curious to see where he ends up. I don't even think like this isn't even a Pat Freiermuth case. Like I think Pat Freiermuth was clearly ahead of Trey McBride too.
Yeah, I'll have to go back and think about that one. What about Brevin Jordan?
I think Jordan would be ahead of McBride for me.
Yeah, I mean, I will say the positive to the tight ends being bad is like it allows some smaller school guys like Colorado State and Coastal Carolina to be like, okay, well this guy's good, compared to what those guys probably wouldn't have gotten that attention last year. Because now they're competing instead of competing with Pat Freiermuth and Brevin Jordan, they're competing with Jeremy Ruckert and whoever, Greg Dulcich. So that's who they're competing with, I guess, this year. But no, I think that, I definitely like what McBride does. And I think that speed and kind of the game breaking nature, like that's what you want in like a modern tight end. But also I wasn't heavily impressed by anything I saw. So, I mean, he's tight end 1. I don't want to say the same way. No, definitely not the same way. But we kind of talked about Kyle Hamilton being our number 1 safety, and we were like, well, we have all these problems with him, but he's still number 1, and that's sort of how I feel about this. But no, he was definitely clear, safety 1 in a good safety class versus these guys are, Trey McBride is number 1 in a bad tight end class. I do have a question for Steven, though. You looked at all the positions in football and were like, I want to be a tight end.
Dude, I was a Chargers fan who loved Antonio Gates, man.
That's fair.
And in Utah, like you have a weight limit. So I had to be an offense and defensive lineman from the get-go. So I never aspired to be like a receiver or a corner or anything like that. I knew I wasn't that kind of athlete, frankly, but I knew I could be a tight end, and I played tight end as a freshman, and I was good at it. But then they had me bulk up and keep playing offensive line and defensive line. So, I always loved to be tight end because I was like, I like blocking. I just also want to catch the ball from time to time and score touchdowns. But so tight end's fun, man. Tight end's the best of both worlds. You get to hit people and you get to catch the ball.
Yeah, I'm not playing tight end anytime soon. But Steven, if we go to Vegas and there's a 7-on-7, you can be my tight end, and I will not throw to you. If you want to catch it, then I definitely won't be throwing to you. Okay,
that's
Steven.
Why I'm going to recruit Arjun as our quarterback then, because Arjun.
Apparently he's really good.
Arjun's a legend. He's got all greens on his PFF scores from his outdoor football games.
Yeah,
I want to rush Arjun as a edge rusher. I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna blitz up the middle or something.
Better mobility than Joe Burrow.
Steven, if you could, where would you fit it in this tight end class? What is your comparison here? Are you a Jake Ferguson? Are you a Cole Turner? Are you a Bellinger? Who are you here?
Steven's like a Jeremy Ruckert without knees. At this
That's exactly what. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's the kind of tight end that I would have been if I would have kept doing that.
Yeah. Calcaterra is like the shortest tight end, so that would be me, I guess.
Yeah. I definitely wanted to be a wide receiver, but my mom wouldn't let me play football, so no. But
are you gonna let your kids play football?
Oh, absolutely not. Head trauma? Fuck no. But yeah.
Yeah, I had four concussions in high school and one in college from football. So
yeah, it doesn't sound fun.
No. Yeah. I was hurt a lot, man. I was like Anthony Davis of football.
Oh, Lakers eliminated, by the way. Had to get that off there.
There you go. All right, guys. Tyler, any final thoughts before we head out for the evening?
No, happy to dive into interior offensive linemen next. And just overall, it's been nice to go through mock drafts and be like, oh, I know who that is now. So we're getting to that point where we'll kind of know everybody from 1 to 200.
That's good. Yeah.
Alex is so excited to watch some more blocking, except for the bigger fat guys.
Wait, what positions do we have left? Interior offensive line and what else?
In corner. Those are our last two.
Okay, I'll have fun with corner, but I'll get through interior offensive line for the sake of the show. We got to get through it, and I won't have to do it again for another year. So let's get it done.
There you go. And then this is something that obviously the Chargers can be looking at. So I'm excited for that one as well. And hopefully there's more than just 5 that we like.
Got to get to Nick Ford somehow.
Yes, I will. Better believe it. All right, so that's going to do it for us today, guys. As always, if you are listening to the audio version of this, please leave us a rating or review. If you are watching, please go subscribe and like the video. So we are going to do a Q&A on Saturday, and then we'll do our interior offensive line video on Sunday. I have an interview with Pro Football Focus lead analyst Sam Monson. That's dropping tomorrow, so be sure to check that out. And Maddie Schmidt will be dropping an interview of her own on Friday as well. She continues to crush it and broke some news about Gene DeLance earlier this week. So be sure to follow her and the rest of us to get all your Chargers content. So that's going to do it for us today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.